Well, Mark, my first question is you talk a lot in the book about specific things about running, but in general, so much of your book kind of bucks conventional wisdom. And I'm wondering, how do you think about that? What is your thought process around what you latch onto and what you challenge?
Yeah, so Brendan, I'm 52, and I think to buck conventional wisdom, you have to live at least a few years and see what's going on with the big picture, with healthcare, with running. Look at people who are living well for longer periods of time, not, setting a PR one year and, falling off the cliff after that, because that really is, like yourself, you're a runner. People stay healthy and happy running, and it's not so much about what time they got on a certain season. It's 20, 30 years later.
Mhm.
Can they still go out there and enjoy themselves? And, if they do have a performance goal, hit that. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of people do want to line up for races, but if you get unhealthy, you get hurt, burn out, then you're done and it's hard to get back into the sport. In healthcare, we can go into a lot of topics. I mean, it's all over the media now. Every day there's, what they call a medical flip-flop or reversal. So probably in most fields, what we learn in school, half of it may be wrong, half of it may be right. And I don't think that's, atypical for healthcare. But human lives are at stake too. So I think in healthcare, we have to be honest with people. And when we have been wrong with something or maybe not so sure, we need to come clean and tell the general population that just so they can make their own decisions, not just follow empirically what someone in a white coat might say, which might not be true today.
Hmm. And what would be like a big example of that you particularly interested in?
Yeah, probably the one that has the most impact on public health, and I'll be, blunt about it, is I'd probably, if you look at loss of human lives and suffering, you're military and there's been multiple world wars and conflicts, you know, disease, infectious disease in the past. But if you look at human suffering since the U.S. dietary guidelines of 1980 and the vilification of fats, as causing heart disease and what name that unfortunately that was incorrect.
Mm.
And look at what's happened since 1980. I'm in West Virginia, the most obese, most diabetic state in the country. And, every day people are losing their lives, losing limbs, losing their kidneys, losing their eyesight, and they followed this advice and they were fed this way in schools and in the military. Military rations are still based on those guidelines. Air Force basic training goes through more Crave cereal than any place on the planet. And they kind of pride themselves in that jokingly. And, if any, you can look up how much sugar is in that. You might as well just have Snicker bars for breakfast. But at least the Snickers have the peanuts. Crave cereal is like, pouring sugar on top of white bread
Hmm.
and having that for breakfast. And you want to be a military soldier? I mean, I'm sorry, it's not going to work. And
Hmm.
obesity in the military is huge.
Hmm.
1 in 4 kids can't even enlist these days coming out of high school because of obesity. And that's the main driver, lack of physical fitness. If they can't pass that entry standard, they can't even get an opportunity to get out of a bad situation, where they may be in their hometown, poor jobs, poverty. But think of in your career how many people you worked with were given opportunity just by being able to enlist, get a job skill, get college paid for. The
Yeah.
world is your oyster. Then opportunity opens up,
Hmm.
but opportunity shuts down pretty quick if you're an obese 10-year-old.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
it's not your fault. It's not that obese 10-year-old's fault.
mm-hmm. Yeah. And Mark, you have a story of a young man in the Air Force who he failed the physical fitness test a couple times, and then you brought in some of your methods to help him get through that. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, so the methods to pass a fitness test are really how to get healthy. So a fitness test for the military isn't like we should all shoot for the highest score, which unfortunately some of the culture kind of sets that up, and some people are natural runners and some aren't. Some people are stronger. The Army and different services kind of shape their fitness test for the specific skills of the job. So I view the fitness test as just a prerequisite for safety. Can you do your job? Can we send you downrange? Can we deploy you without you being a risk to yourself or others? And everyone, just like, when you were in service and, I was active duty, you get a call from the orderly room, you have to leave a urine sample, every day of the week, you should be able to pass. It shouldn't be like you have to specifically train for one day.
Mm-hmm.
This is just a standard. But the rules of passing a fitness test every day is aerobic development, meaning slow down, build mitochondria, build capillaries, reduce body fat, make yourself a warrior. And that's mostly how you eat. When you're eating junk food, it's hard to outrun that. So when people eat a lot of sugar and junk food, they tend to store that in their bellies as fat, and they don't understand that. But I talk about that in the book. Eating fat doesn't make you fat. Eating junk food, processed carbs, sugar drinks, and they serve sugar drinks in a chow hall, Coca-Cola, Gatorade, juices, all that stuff. And how do we expect people to pass their fitness test? Then we tell them to go out and run harder, and then they get hurt running. So slow down, work on your running mechanics, don't eat junk food, get rid of the belly fat, which isn't by burning calories while running, it's by not eating the stuff that's going to make you store the fat to begin with. And then it all comes pretty clear, and you actually wake up with energy every day. Yeah. I think we talked about Adam in the story, but he's not a unique person. If you wake up with energy every day, it's not like, gosh, I have to go do PT. You want to do PT. Your body's making this energy. And you probably remember when you were just, in a good phase of training, when you weren't overtrained and you weren't hurt. Like you would look forward to going out in the woods and running. You're like, wow, sitting in class all day and you're just like a caged animal. Like, get me out of here. I need to get out. In Maine, just, geez, it's beautiful places, unless it's the middle of winter in the dark. But even then, that can be kind of spiritual when you're out there in the elements, as long as you got decent clothes. Some of the most enjoyable running I have is in, the coldest, remote places.
Mm-hmm. So how did you specifically work some of that in with Adam was the man in the book?
Yeah, so if you're listening, so one thing is just understanding the zone that you need to run in to be able to tap into body fat. And then you just stay there. Because what you want to do is develop kind of a fat-burning engine. I mean, you want to run on fat, not sugar, which means you're living on that all day. That's an efficient human being. So when we run hard, our bodies default to sugar, sugar, sugar. It's the easiest access type of fuel. And a lot of people culturally, in the military too, it's like, no pain, no gain. Easy is one step below, like I feel like I want to die. And that's kind of ingrained into people. But if you take, a formula, couple simple ways to know you're in that happy zone is, are you happy and smiling is one. If you can chat and talk, you're probably in a better zone. If no, you're not there. You can do like 180 minus your age if you want to get a little more technical, and you just start running. So say you're a 30-year-old, put the heart rate monitor on, 150 would be the zone, and if it beeps, slow down. And what you'll find is, as we describe in the book, someone might be at 12 minutes a mile before it beeps, and your temptation is to throw the heart rate monitor away and just, that's wasting my time. This is too slow. But you stay there, and it could even be a walk run. But what you'll find is a couple months later, now that 12 minutes a mile at that heart rate of 150 is now a 10 minutes a mile at a heart rate of 150. Stay with it. Now it's an 8 minutes a mile at a heart rate of 150. I mean, now you're kind of changing your body's physiology. Get rid of the sugar, and you've taken off 20 pounds of fat in the middle too. So your effort to run a specific pace is a marker of your fitness, not your top end gear, but what is what we call it aerobic speed. How fast can you run while eating lunch, so to speak? Mm-hmm. If you're a soldier, you want to be able to run for long periods of time while your brain is able to focus. I mean, the running is just the transportation to get you from one place or another. So you want to be like a hybrid engine or an electric engine where you're highly efficient at the highest speed that your body can develop, if that makes sense. But that takes patience. It's not a 6-week couch to PT test type of thing. This is years and years and years of just being an active human being. But it's never too late to start. That's I forget who said this, the best time to have planted a tree would have been 20 years ago, but second best time is today. So if you've been down a 10-year slide, it's okay. It's cool. Just start from the basics and work up.
Yeah. And Mark, your own story follows this sort of arc too. You had a lot of learning along the way. You said you found out you were pre-diabetic. How did that come about, and how did you make these changes?
Yes, I've made several changes along the way, Brandon. The first one was understanding a little bit about running mechanics in the foot. So I was a track runner in college, and we all did the same things. I think hurt 50% of the time, but 50% of the time, I was able to run. So I was able to run 50% of the time, but 50% of the time, I was able to run. So I was able to run 50% of the time, but 50% of the time, I was able to run. So I was able to run 50% of the time, but 50% of the time, I was able to run. So I was able to run 50% of the time, but 50% of the time, I was able to run. So I was able to run 50% of the time, but 50% of the time, I was able to run. So I was able to run 50% of the time, but 50% of the time, I was able to run. So I was able to run 50% of the time, but 50% of the time, I was able to run. So I was able to run 50% of the time, but 50% of the time, I was able to run. So I was able to run 50% of the time, but 50% of the time, I was able to run. So I was able to run 50% of the time, but 50% of the time, I was able to run. So I was able to run 50% of the time, but 50% of the time, I was able to that's how it rolled. And we were all type A, right? They're the kind of people that make it onto the track team. You're just a hard charger. You can inflict pain in your body. That's kind of the epitome of, a military soldier, or an athlete. You just, how much pain can we endure?
Hmm.
But then things break. And, that kind of sits with you until you kind of come to the day, well, maybe you can't run anymore. And that's a sad day. I had my feet operated on in the year 2000 for my toes were all bent in and arthritic, probably from misformed shoes, malformed shoes,
Hmm.
poor mechanics, not understanding, how to run, and came out of that surgery, and the opinion from the medical side was, running is bad for me, i.e., because look what it did.
Hmm.
But my mind liked running, so a couple months later, I had to go figure it out.
Hmm.
So I started to look up running mechanics. As you can imagine, how much information or lectures did I get on running biomechanics in medical school and running injuries? It was zero,
Yeah.
and maybe worse than zero, because the paradigm we taught was treat a symptom.
Hmm.
So we kind of thought we knew what to do with these things. Well, of course, brace the foot, give it more support, give it more cushion, use ibuprofen, use
Hmm.
these medications, shoot steroids into things, because that's we all just treated symptoms, but that doesn't work. You got to get at the root cause. So I slowed down, started experimenting and trimming shoes, playing with these minimal shoes that's before Born to Run or any of that stuff.
Hmm.
Ultimately started running barefoot. So that was kind of fixing the running, but my whole family is designed for heart disease, diabetes, obesity, all of these common things. So, I was working on a military project actually about 6 years ago and traveling around bases trying to help people with the fitness test. A new chief of staff had come on and he tightened the screws on the test. And I needed to learn why people were failing the test. And I noticed that obesity and failures traveled hand in hand. And that shouldn't be too surprising to people listening. But the question was why. I think the standard conventional assumption was, well, these people just need to eat less and exercise more. That's why they're obese.
Hmm.
And I looked, I started to just look at data, and I'd become more of a, I guess, the common word is a critical thinker. But all of us progress from, if we're a student, we're just trying to gather knowledge. The more you work and the more you see people and the more you experience things yourself, you can't help but be more of a critical thinker, meaning you just question things. So anytime you see something, you kind of pause if your brain is saying, well, I assume this is true. So I questioned why they were obese, and I started to look at the data. Well, they're all shown up for the same PT. So clearly, these folks who are obese are exercising
Hmm.
the same, and they're going to the same chow halls, so they're
Hmm.
probably eating the same. So maybe there's something more I need to learn about obesity, and that's insulin resistance, carbohydrate intolerance, genetic attributes that are going to drive you to this. What are these people eating, different than someone else? And I looked at my own labs at that time, and I was waking up at this time at 2 in the morning and having another bowl of cereal every
Hmm.
morning. So I was becoming pre-diabetic. My body couldn't burn fat at all. My average sugar level called an A1C was high. All of my metabolic markers, if you didn't look at me and say, here's like skinny Mark Runner, you would say this person is metabolically sick, looking like any other West Virginian.
Hmm.
And then I challenged nutrition. I just started to come across literature that was really old literature that again, the dietary guidelines, before 1980, every diet for diabetes or obesity was low carbohydrate diets.
Yeah.
It's the problem with sugar metabolism, high insulin levels. Insulin's a storage hormone. But when society and the medical establishment became afraid of fat, meaning, well, we think fat clogs arteries, they couldn't tell people to eat fat.
Hmm.
Because if you tell people not to eat sugar, but of course eating fat clogs your arteries, they have to eat something. So somehow conventional wisdom, just no matter what your condition is, don't eat fat. American Heart Association, they still push that out.
Hmm.
Reduce fat. When diabetes, we've controlled smoking, so there's a reduction in heart disease now since 1980. But if you look at the data, that's because less people are smoking.
Hmm.
But we're certainly doing nothing for obesity and diabetes, and that's the probably equal, if not higher driver today of heart disease in the upcoming generation and millennials. People in their 30s now developing heart disease.
Hmm.
These folks have heard the mantra on the smoking, and there's, of course, regulation, there's policy. So
Yes.
smoking now, even in my state, where at best we've flattened it,
Hmm.
but it's not affordable. It's not accessible, meaning you can't just, for kids especially, they can't just go to 7-Eleven and buy it. They're not of age.
Hmm.
Um, and it's not acceptable, meaning if you want to smoke in a public place, you really can't, or in your office. But sugar is the exact opposite. It's the most affordable thing.
Yeah.
Junk food, people can use food stamps with that. Sugar sweetened beverages, number one.
Hmm.
Every birthday party, every lunch, brought into the office has bagels and muffins
Hmm.
and and it's accessible. Everywhere you go, there's another vending machine. So how do you win?
Mm.
It's we need to attack policy there
Yeah.
if we're going to make any headroad, and that's kind of what I'm after now. It's not a popular place to be, but we got rid of sugar drinks in my hospital. That's a first step, but
Hmm.
we need to go further than that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's important too.
Yeah, so that, when I started to dig in, Brandon, to the literature and realized that I had this condition
Hmm.
and the treatment was remove the grains and the sugar. So I did that. And this was 6, 7 years ago. And my goal wasn't to lose weight, but what I immediately noticed when I had my last bowl of cereal is I felt good. I could have breakfast, I could have a couple eggs, throw some veggies in there, and I'm good. Like I'm not needing a bar at 10 in the morning. Maybe if I'm busy and don't even need lunch, I'll eat dinner later that
Hmm.
night. But I felt like a normal, like a human again. I could eat dinner, not snack at night, go to bed, wake up the next morning, even go for a run without a power bar or something beforehand, come back and have a nice meal. So I wasn't controlled by the sugar,
Hmm.
which is also addictive too. So, I'm pretty headstrong, so I don't overthink the addiction. I just saw the medical effects of what was happening, and that was enough to make me get rid of all the cereal and breads. I'd hoard this stuff. If ever you were traveling and there were muffins and bagels, you keep them in your room just so
Yep.
you always had that. But I didn't understand it, and I'm trying to help medical people understand this too, because we still push this out, even to diabetics. If you're a type 2 diabetic out there and you're told, well, eat whole grain bread, it's good for you, question that because
Hmm.
it's straight up, all you need is your glucometer. Have 2 slices of whole wheat bread, check your sugar before and an hour after, and just see what happens.
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised. And it's like shock treatment.
Hmm.
Maybe I shouldn't do that.
Yeah, I've recently made this sort of dietary change too, and the thing I find is that it's liberating.
It's liberating.
For so long, I was on the system where it was you get
Yeah,
up in the
you're running.
morning, you eat something, you run, you eat something else, you have a Gatorade because you need to put all the sugar back, and it was a constant chore to keep up with all of this feeding all the time. But it's a huge paradigm shift to alter that for sure.
It is, and each person, there's no products or no hocus pocus here. It's just think back. Almost everyone has someone in their family lineage, like who was the last well person in your gene pool?
Hmm.
Well person, meaning the person who was like in their 90s and just went to bed and dropped dead, right? They didn't become a 20-year medical patient.
Hmm.
And just look at how they lived. And I mean, these people ate like in my state. I mean, gosh, it's hard to find a centenarian, meaning a 100-year-old who hasn't like loaded up eggs their whole life.
Hmm.
Because as you get older, you need that protein, especially to keep your muscle mass. You need protein. So you need protein as you get older, and you need to lift heavy things. And it
Hmm.
doesn't mean go to the gym, but look at, old school well people. They just carry their own bags, right? They're
Yeah.
climbing up stairs,
Hmm.
but they're not eating white bread and jam for breakfast. They're eating traditional foods,
Hmm.
bacon and eggs. Sure, throw some veggies if they're seasonal, but the heart of it is going to be seafood if they live near the coast.
Hmm.
We don't have much seafood here in the middle of West Virginia. So, I mean, yeah, we're farmland. So to tell them to eat the meat. So I'm not afraid to tell, my citizens here, meat and eggs are health food.
Hmm.
They really are. And we need to come clean with that. Everyone's talking about the plants, the plants, the plants. So I agree, plants are good and they're health food, but you're missing another key thing if that's all you're eating.
Hmm.
You do need high quality sources of fat and protein.
Hmm. Yeah.
But
And
see how you feel. Everyone's an N of one, right?
that's so true.
So
And
you do it for a month, just eat real food without the breads and the grains and the pastries and the rolls and all that stuff.
Mhm. Yeah, and there are still
Veggies,
little exceptions and people who I
meat,
talk to
cheese,
and
butter.
myself. Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, another thing that
grandma.
you've talked about is shoes and this idea that we needed more cushioning and more cushioning. And I remember as I was coming up as a young runner, there was all of this thought on tweaking my shoes to find the perfect shoe with the perfect control. And I have a couple examples.
Oh, you brought some shoes.
I thought it'd
Old
be good to
school.
have
Let's see what you
physical
got.
examples. So you
Oh
can
yeah,
see,
there's the Air Max. Is that the air
mhm,
bladder in the back?
yeah, with the
But then you
big,
got the Minimus.
big air heel. And then I've got the minimal shoe. So for anybody who's watching this, they can see the physical difference in what we're talking about,
Yeah.
the distinction between these two heels. What's the idea here with backing off on all of the control with the shoe?
Yeah, because your foot is a pretty amazing, what would you even call it? Evolution, mechanical. I
Hmm.
mean, there's 26 bones, 33 joints, 100 muscle tendon insertion. So the foot's a spring,
Hmm.
so it's a spring and it's got to function like that. So a good, strong, stable foot that has mobility, when you hit the ground, you don't want cushion to cushion you. You want your foot to work and give you
Hmm.
that energy back. So, well, watch a Kenyan run with or without shoes. One who's been brought up barefoot, they have this perfect springy stride. And if the foot is not functioning well, if the foot is locked up, the ankle is locked up, even with a cushioned shoe, the forces, something's got to take the load.
Hmm.
Think if you have a Hummer or a vehicle and you're riding on a dirt road and you lock the shocks out,
Hmm.
the chassis has to take the hit.
Hmm.
So I see now in medical practice, young folks age 50, their knee, hip, they've got arthritis, so if your foot is not able to take that load, your knee or your hip and your back is going to take it because it's got to go somewhere. So I try to help people learn how to get their foot in the game. And then running doesn't, it's not like thud, thud, thud. If you go to a group, and I've traveled around a lot to military bases, and, there's 100 airmen in the bleachers, and how many of y'all like to run? And there might be like one guy like you, Brandon, who ran high school cross country or, ran a little in college or something, raises their hand and everyone's looking, scorning because they all hate that kid, right? He's the little cross country kid, and the rest of them hate to run
Hmm.
because every step they're pounding their body. It's painful.
Hmm.
But you put them through a clinic, I'll have them take off their shoes. I'll have them learn to run soft, run slow. And what's crazy is you do a lap just super soft, super slow, maybe in their socks, maybe even in their bare feet, and you see a smile on their face. They
Hmm.
don't realize it because you didn't like cue them to this, and you finish and you look around and you say, wait, I see about half of you doing something that I bet you wouldn't have believed you would have done.
Hmm.
And what is it? And then someone will raise their hand. Look, they're smiling. And
Hmm.
it's like, wow. So if you're happy, you're going to want to go do it again.
Hmm.
So if I can, and that's slowing down too. So if you're a coach, you've probably worked with kids. If you're a coach, whatever that sport, if the kid wants to come back to practice the next day, that's it. You're an
Hmm.
awesome coach.
Hmm.
That's all. They don't want to come back to practice the next day, no matter what your technical skills or program is. You're not a good coach. You're something about what you're doing. So I just want them to wake up and not hate to run.
Yeah.
Because if they wanted to have a 20 or 30-year career, I'm sorry, it sucks to be you. You have to pass the fitness
Hmm.
test. This isn't a corporate job, so embrace it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't want them to embrace the suck. I want them to embrace the joy and the health. Right? That's an army term, right? Embrace the suck.
Absolutely.
That's how they
Yeah.
all approach it. I'm just going to embrace the suck for 30 years. Is that good for your endocrine system in your brain? No, or in your joints. Then they get on, profile disability, discharge medical because they did embrace the suck and they herniated their disc in their back.
Hmm.
That's not doing anyone any favors, but they kind of take pride in, and it's sad. Yeah, we need to do a better job at training soldiers and airmen,
Hmm. Yeah. So,
Navy members, seamen and Marines.
hmm, yeah. So this idea with backing off on the shoes and things allows for the foot to function differently.
To feel the ground, yeah.
Hmm. And
A
and
shoe
another,
should be, yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, and another thing that you've talked about is in general posture being something to start with before strength. And I know another thing that I was often taught was if something is injured, it's because it's too weak. It's not strong enough to take what's going on. But I think a lot of it looking back was also the way that I was moving and my posture and things like that. So how does that come into play as a prerequisite?
Yeah, posture is really is a prerequisite
Hmm.
for anything. So our
Hmm.
bodies are designed to deal with load pretty well, or we wouldn't have got here. So we're designed to deal well with compressive force. And if you're column is lined up well, you could stack, you know, 10 Olympic plates on your head and you won't feel it. But if your column is off and you're loading it, our bodies load 2 to 3 times our weight with every step. But if that column is off, think if you had a stack of hockey pucks, for example, like 30 hockey pucks, just think of all the vertebrae, and you took the bottom hockey puck and you put it on a 10% grade, caution 10% grade, which is the elevation of that shoe that you showed me, that Nike Air. What has to happen to all the other hockey pucks in that column so they don't fall over? Got to like make these little adjustments, and then you hit the ground hard, and now you have all these little adjustments, and there's all these micro tears every time you hit the ground. So you don't wake up one day and, well, I just picked up this pallet the wrong way and herniated my disc. These are chronic injuries, that finally one day come to a painful threshold. But we're doing little bits of damage every day to our body if we're not doing the movements correctly. If you're doing good movement, you're actually remodeling correctly. So what you put in is what you put in. So your body can correct all these things as long as you're putting the right message in. But if you keep putting the wrong message in, hundreds and thousands of times a day, you might be training fitness, but you're breaking your chassis down. So I think if you want a long time in the sport or in activity, like anything, get the movement down right. If you're going to go to lift, don't load the bar until you've got the movement perfect. Same thing with running. I don't know why we ignore it in running. If you're going to go to a good CrossFit gym, the instructor is going to make sure you've got the perfect movement before you're going to load the bar up. And you're never to lift to failure, because that's just teaching failure. But many runners run to failure. You see them at the end of a PT session and they're just, you look at them, their whole bodies are just in complete disaster mode, but they're like embracing the suck. But you wouldn't see that in the gym, right? The trainer would say, no, you're done. Or let's fix your mechanics, So yeah, it's not rocket science. It's like bring common sense back, learn the movement right, practice the right movement. Yeah. It's like if you golf, for example, Brandon, like if you keep slicing the ball to the right because you can see it, you're not going to go swing 1,000 times with that same swing to reinforce the movement pattern that makes you slice. You're going to kind of back off, do a few tweaks, get a 9-iron blade with a little sweet spot, the most precise. You're not worried about hitting it far. You're just worried about hitting it perfectly every time, straight, reproduce it. Okay, then you can break out the big club.
Yeah, with that feedback, as you pointed out.
Yeah, you got to have the movement down. Yeah. And I think we're screwing kids up because we put these big shoes on kids, and you see, even in first or second grade, these kids have these big cloggy shoes. And they don't move well. I mean, they're heavy, they're stiff. Their feet don't work springy because they're in these casts. It's really sad. Then you see the kids in the more minimal shoes. They're bouncing around, playing jump rope. They're looking good. So if you have kids out there, keep your kids barefoot or in skinny shoes as long as you can, which would be forever. My kids are in all these skinny shoes. Their bodies reject. You can't. Their bodies reject shoes. They just won't put them on because they can't move. They hate it.
Yeah, I find that when I wear a big clunky sneaker or something, that I'll try it on. It feels soft and cushy, and that's pleasant. And then I'll go and run around and be going up an escalator or some stairs or something, and I feel like I don't have the same sense of where my foot is going, and like I might trip or something. And when I wear the thin shoes, I have a much better sense of the ground. And that helps me to be more comfortable in them.
Yeah, you have to feel the ground to stabilize yourself on the ground. Sure, if you want to go to bed and you want to lay on a soft mattress, that's all cool. If you were jumping off a 3-story building and you just wanted to cushion the impact, you'd have the big air mattress. Yeah. But think of a gymnast, for example, someone who actually has to stick the landing, because in running you do have to stick the landing. You can't just smash into the ground and have this big foam thing there, because you actually have to get off the ground again, stabilize that landing in mid-stance. That's where your foot's directly under your center of mass. So a gymnast, for example, is always in bare feet, and they're not landing on rock-hard concrete. There's a little mat there that's got just the right compliance. It's kind of a firm compliance, like a wrestling mat. And that's what a shoe should do. It helps you. You have to have that tactile sense, so your body can micro adjust probably millions of things every time you have 200,000 nerve endings in your feet. that are there for a reason. I'm not here to claim I know what all 2,000 of them do, but they reset everything in the kinetic chain when you hit the ground, so you don't have to, like if you're trail running, you can't be thinking about, well, I got to micro adjust, this part of my calf muscle, loosen this. It all has to happen like that. So a gymnast actually feels the ground before they even hit the ground, just because they've done it so much. They anticipate the landing. But if they had to land on a big foam pad and stick the landing, that they couldn't. The only time they use that is if they're practicing some maneuver and they just need a crash pad. If they're learning a new tumble. But every time they, like an acrobat too, someone on a high wire, they're bare feet on the wire, or the rope, or whatever they're walking on. They've got to feel that stuff.
Yeah.
But just try it, and again, your first minimal or barefoot run is not 10 miles. Like any training, it's a process. If you're using, the only people that get hurt putting minimal shoes on are people that really, they don't have the foot strength to even walk around. So we get people to walk in them first. I own a shoe store. Then we get them to maybe walk, run a little bit. But the first day you go to the gym, you might come back and you might be a little bit sore. That's not dangerous. That means you've woken something up, but just don't go do the same thing the next day. So if you have a brain and you listen to it, you'll do fine in the minimal shoes. I mean, what was your experience as you transitioned? Did you kind of do it smart and gradual, and now you feel good in the shoes, or did you, being a college runner, first day you heard about these shoes and do your usual workout? How was your entry in?
Yeah, I stepped into it because I've become very sensitive over the years to these things, and I've learned a little bit and talked to wise folks like yourself. And so I went to a shoe that had less drop, and then eventually to the zero drop.
Yeah, smart.
Because I'd been coming from the big airbag heel, and so it was something that I wanted to phase into over probably the process of maybe a year. Went through a pair of sneakers, and then went through another pair of sneakers, and then got to it.
Yeah, year's about right. And for the folks out there that don't know what the word drop means, so if you cut a shoe in half, kind of down the middle, the drop is the difference between the elevation in the heel and the elevation in the forefoot. So, for example, a high heel shoe, obviously, it's got a big drop. It's kind of that angle. It's like a ramp. So most running shoes have about an inch ramp between the heel and the ball of the foot. And that's profound if you look at the percent grade. And that changes how your foot interacts with the ground a lot, how your ankle interacts with the ground. So everything changes when you do that. But it's a process to go back to flat. So that's why I think kids are important. So if the kids never put heels on, then they don't have to do this 1 or 2 year transition back. Just like if they don't eat sugar, then they don't have to, where is it irreversible? I don't know. It's happening so early now with kids that once a child is obese at like age 4 or 5, their odds of becoming an obese adult is pretty much 100%. There's something that's why, like, if you're going to do nothing policy-wise, is restrict all this stuff from the youngest. Then we need to figure out what to do with everyone who's got the problem. That's a different story. But prevention is 100% work upstream. Same with running. Don't work upstream. Don't allow the scenario to get yourself hurt to begin with.
And another trend that's starting to really get some steam that you talk about in the book is mobility work, thinking of mobility as something that's crucial to your exercise regimen. And how did you come to that? How did you start to work that in?
Getting old is I mean, not 52, I wouldn't say I'm old, but yeah, you have to kind of resist the forces of modern life. So I've got to drive to work. Luckily, I work in a hospital, so I'm walking most of the day. I'm not sitting in front of a computer. I mean, you sit in front of the patient, talk to them, talk to the family, but you're walking, you round, meaning we walk. So I'd say 80% of my workday is on my feet. I'll take the stairs. So the more just mobile you are in the day, the less you have to do to undo the stuff that happens in the day. But no kidding, if you drive 2 hours to work, sit 8 hours, drive home, sit down for dinner, have elevated heel shoes, you are super tight, in your hip flexors, all those muscles in the front of the hips, which are really important because if those are super tight, you can't use your glute muscle,
Hmm.
which is the most powerful muscle. So you've
Hmm.
got this engine room you can't even engage, and your calf, plantar fascia, Achilles gets shortened if you're in the shoes. So the body starts remodeling to these positions. So I'm at a stand-up desk right now.
Hmm.
I've got a couple little half dome things I can stand on for my feet. So just find a way in your day to, and we talk about it in the book, just in mobility and movement. Your best position's your next position. So I'm not going to stand in front of this computer for 10 hours today. I'll go out, do something else. Maybe I'll sit for a little bit, or I'll lay on my belly and type a little bit. So just, without driving yourself crazy, just keep mobile.
Hmm.
Don't sit. Sitting all day is just bad. So,
Hmm.
and I think even if you have a quote desk job, there's so many simple and inexpensive things you can do now at your desk to not just be sitting at that desk.
Hmm. Yeah. And it's obviously working for you. How many sub 3 marathons has it been?
Yeah, I've done a sub 3 hour for 30 straight years.
That's
And I
fantastic.
just ran a 3:02. So this year I ran a 3:04 at Boston
Hmm.
in the horrendous conditions. It was 30-mile-an-hour headwinds and pouring rain. So I lined up on Sunday at the Marine Corps Marathon. It's been busy,
Hmm.
just with finishing a book, kids. So
Hmm.
I gave it a go. I finished in 3:02.
Wow.
So I may let the streak die this year. But I
Okay.
think it goes into the book. So at a certain point, trying to shoot for time, so I feel
Hmm.
good about what I did this Sunday. I stayed on, ran 650 per mile for 22 miles, just right on pace. But I haven't done a run more than 13 miles since the Boston Marathon.
Hmm.
So I haven't had time.
Hmm.
And, I gave, and the wheels come off a little the last 3 miles. And, I just lost that spring.
Hmm.
But to put in the amount of work I would need to keep running those fast times, I think other things in my life would suffer and it might not be healthy. So I'm good with letting it go this year.
Hmm.
People are saying, aren't you going to kind of find another marathon in December? And right now, I don't think so.
No.
I think I'll just do the smart thing and just be, 3:02, I'm happy with it. And I did give it my go.
Hmm. Yeah.
Set myself up to do the time, just, ran the pace. But, I don't have time to do all these hard interval type
Mm.
workouts. Just if you're really pushing the edge, you gotta inflict some of that stuff on
Hmm.
yourself. But there's a cost to that
Hmm.
year after year.
Hmm.
So I think that's not a cost I'm willing to pay for the other things I'm doing in my life.
Hmm. Yeah. And
I feel fine now. 2 days later, I'll go out and jog with my dog today. So,
oh,
don't
wow.
inflict any damage on yourself.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah. High volume training, in my experience, it becomes a lifestyle decision. It has an
It
impact on
is.
everything around you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Mark, before I ask my last question, where should people look for you online?
Yeah, so we've got a couple places. For the book, we made a website, runforyourlifebook.com, which has a lot of videos, instruction, and exercises, articles. I have a blog website called naturalrunningcenter.com, and that has a lot of information on running form, running shoes. If a site that kind of links to a lot of things I do, race directing, some of the nutrition things we're doing, community work, is called drmarksdesk.com,
Okay.
and that kind of links to a lot of different things. So those are good places to find me. If you're in West Virginia, come to our store, Two Rivers Treads, and that website for that is tworiverstreads.com. We have online store, and if you purchase the book, I'm sorry, if you purchase $130 worth of anything there, we'll throw the book in, for you, because we want people to support small retail is something that's struggling in America. And,
Mm.
small retail in small communities give back, so I've got about 6 employees. And so these are local jobs, local taxes, we pay rent in a local town, but out there, you can go on Amazon and get anything you want these days. But I think the service you get in these small, whether it's a local restaurant, just think about that next time you purchase something. Even if it's a big box store in your local town, none of that money stays local. So the
Hmm.
only money that really stays local are small local businesses, locally owned, locally employed, that
Hmm.
don't have corporate offices in some other place.
Hmm.
So that's really my pride, is doing things like that. And directing races too. We have a big race called Freedom's Run
Hmm.
that we just finished. We have another one in the spring, Harper's Ferry Half Marathon. So we get people into the national parks.
Hmm.
We write about it all in the book. That's really the joy, is I could really care less what my times are now. If I see new people in my community getting out and running and setting personal bests and achieving goals, that's what there's the joy right there.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. So, Mark, my final question is: you're a leader, you're a physician, you're in the Air Force. How can a leader create a culture of being healthy?
I think you just got to live it yourself. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, so it's like any military leader. I mean, I don't think by intent they, are going to go to leadership school and watch some PowerPoints and and be a leader, right? Or,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know how that all goes. The online courses, read a few books on
Mm-hmm.
leadership, and it's like, okay, I got this. No, I mean, I think it just evolves as you have to learn. I mean, first of all, you just have to watch life go by, and you kind of see what are people doing that's sticky, that's good, and how do they behave, and how do they bring people along. And it's not by force. It's, follow me and join me and be willing to make all the mistakes, but just show up every day, right? Just like your training partners, show up every day, do the elbow grease work, so I direct these races and I'm the first one out there and I'm the last one to go home. I'm chucking cones into trucks, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just be out there. You go out on the group run and you run with the slowest one there. You host the workshops and the seminars, but just be there and just keep showing up and and write about it. I think ultimately, it's hard. The hardest thing is actually putting your thoughts to pen and writing it. If that's not your background. So you can do all that, but then okay, to really pass it forward. That's why I feel good about getting the book done. That took like 5 years, because I don't have any time, Brandon. It's like, and to write, gosh, you got to like block off a few hours with no distraction. That's
Mm-hmm.
hard to do. So like in little chunks, I was able to put this together, and finally, like I'm done. So I can pass on some through that. Because I think if you are going to lead, you have to mentor and pass it forward and bring people along that if, I've decided to go away, someone else is going to be able to pick it up and run with it. And I feel in my community, we have wonderful people who are like, if, I got deployed or something for a year, nothing's going to fall apart. Everything will just keep rolling along. And that's the sweet spot right there, is when you have people who can step in.
Well, Mark, that's great, and I'm so glad you did take the time to write the book. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
No, well, thank you. And thanks for having me on, Brandon, and for reading the book and, sharing the story.